Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to make an amazingly chic, long sleeve, modern sweater. Speaking of, by now y'all already know the drill, but just in case you're new, the best modern crochet tutorials and patterns are here with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 455 grams of yarn. That's 935 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you'd rather be able to breathe underwater or walk through walls. Now, whatever is under the water ain't none of my business, so I'd rather walk through walls. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5 millimeter hook and start off by making a chain the width that we'd like for the collar to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 8. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both loops on our hook. So there's our first, and also through that second. Now after every stitch, we want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly, otherwise the following row will be too tight to work into. Doing this again, inserting your hook into that following chain, insert, yarn over, and gently pull through both. Continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. We've made our way down with our row 1. Now to get started, on our row 2, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now from here, we're going to be doing back loop slip stitch rows. So finding that last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert in through that back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from us, then yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch, insert in through that back loop, yarn over and pull through everything, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So now that our first 2 rows are completed, all we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our back loop slip stitch row with no increases and no decreases for the width of the front panel. So what we're going to do is just continue to repeat our row 2 until we have a portion that can stretch, because remember it will have a decent amount of stretch to it, from mid collarbone across our chest to mid collarbone, and we must end on an odd number in multiples of 3. The front panel portion of my collar is complete. I have a total of 33 rows. My width is just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters. That is unstretched, because remember it does have a decent amount of stretch to it. And what we're going to do from here is insert our stitch markers into the first and into that last row that we made, just so we are framing off our front panel. Now we're going to continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, but now this is going to frame off the shoulder. So get started on your following row. So chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, then I'll meet you back at the end of that row. So I have just completed my following back loop slip stitch row. Now we are going to frame off our shoulder portion the same way that we framed off our front panel. So inserting a stitch marker into the first and into the last row once we have that last row. But just as a really quick tip, I do like to use a different colored stitch marker to frame off the shoulders versus the front and back panel, just so I know what part is what. Now from here, same rules apply as the front panel. Continue to do our back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that can reach from our mid collarbone, so where we ended, up and over our shoulder to our back. Just counting these shoulder rows, we must all end on an even number in multiples of 3, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. I've just completed the shoulder portion of my collar. Now, if yours is completely straight, that's fine. Mine is actually completely straight as well. I just wanted to angle it like this just so we can get a better visual what the collar is going to end up looking like. I now have a total of 69 rows, or just counting my shoulder portion, I did 36 rows. And now my total width is just about 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters unstretched. Now we do want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the first and into the last rows that we did for the shoulder portion. To frame this off, I did use a second stitch marker color. Then from here, we're going to do our back panel, which is going to be done exactly the same way as our front. So chain 1, flip our work. Put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch for the same amount of rows that we had for our front panel, making sure that we're framing that off as well with our same front panel stitch marker colors if we are switching out our colors. Now go ahead and get that portion completed, and then I'll meet you guys back. So we are back. I've just completed the back panel. I did insert my stitch markers into the first and into the last row. My total width is now 15.5 inches or 40 centimeters. Now we're going to do our shoulder. So from where we're at, chain 1, flip our work. More back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases for the same amount of rows that we did for this first shoulder portion, framing that off as well. Then I'll meet you back. So we are back. I've just completed the entirety of my collar with my second shoulder portion. I now have a total of 138 rows. My total width is 21 inches or 54 centimeters. That is still unstretched. Now once we have all of this completed, we're going to fold our work in half so that we can seam it all together. So making sure that our work isn't twisted, we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. And now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam just to make it look like another back loop slip stitch row. So finding that first stitch into the front panel, we're going to insert only in through that front loop. Then finding that next stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through all 3 of those loops. Again, next stitch into the front panel, insert in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert in through that back loop. Then yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back. We are back. We have just completed seaming up our collar. Now we're going to single crochet along the bottom edge of our collar. So first switch out to our 5.5 millimeter hook, chain 1. Now that we have our chain 1, we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So starting with our first side row, which is our stitch marker side row, I'm going to find, well, first I'm going to take this out, and then I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook in through there, and start with just 1 single crochet. Now we do need to make sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into the same stitches just so we know where everything is sectioned off. But from here, continue with 1 single crochet into every side row just to do the next one. This is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and start with just 1 single crochet. Again, this is my next side row, which is this divot. Insert with 1 single crochet. Make our way all the way around with 1 single crochet into every side row, so that should give us the same amount of stitches as rows that we made, and make sure we're inserting our stitch markers into the top of those stitches once we reach those side rows. Slip stitch into that chain space once we made our way all the way around, and I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed single crocheting along the entirety of our collar. Now we can get started on the actual body portion. Now we're going to start with the underarm portion. That's going to be added to the collar in a little bit, so go ahead and put the collar away for now. And now using our same 5.5 millimeter hook, we're all going to start by making a chain that is in multiples of 3. That starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to the bottom of the top that we'd like. Keeping in mind that we are going to have a bottom band as well, so you can make this down to your waist or to your hips. I like for mine to be a little bit cropped, so down to my waist, I'm going to start by making a chain of 27. That's roughly 6 inches or 15 centimeters. So now that we have our chain, we're going to get started with our sedge stitches. So we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And to do our first sedge stitch, it's going to be 1 half double and 1 double crochet into that chain that we blocked off. So starting with the yarn over, we're going to insert our hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, starting with just 1 half double crochet, then into that same chain with a double crochet. So pull through 2, and pull through 2. Now from here, the rest of our sedge stitches is going to be 1 single half double double all into the same stitch. So after we finish up a little sedge stitch cluster, we're always going to skip the following 2 stitches. So skip 1, skip 2, into the next, insert with 1 single crochet, into that same stitch with a half double crochet, same stitch with a double crochet, And we're going to repeat this until we have 2 stitches left. So again, skip 1, skip 2, into that following, start with 1 single crochet, into that same stitch with a half double, same stitch with a double crochet, and from here we're going to continue to skip 2, into the next single half double double into every stitch until we have 2 chains left. So we've made our way all the way down with our row 1, leaving the last 2 chains. Now at the end of every odd number row, for this portion, we are going to end it with an increase. And how we increase with our sedge stitch is with 1 single, 2 half double, and 1 double crochet all into the same stitch. So we should have 2 left. We're going to skip that following stitch and into the stitch right after that, which should be the last one. Start with 1 single, into that same last stitch, 1 half double, then also with a second half double, then also with a double crochet. Now we're at the end of our row 1. We should have 3 more stitches than chains that we made. And for every even number row for this portion, we aren't going to do any increases or decreases. So we're going to start with a chain 1 and flip. Now we're going to do our first sedge stitch, same way that we did the previous row. So start with just 1 half double, 1 double into the same stitch. So yarn over, into that first stitch with 1 half, and also with 1 double crochet. From here, we're still going to skip 1, skip 2, into the next with a single half double, double. Let's do this just once more. You're going to skip 1, skip 2. Now we're always going to be working into our previous row's single crochet stitch to get the texture that we want. So skip 1, skip 2. That next one's a single because it's a little bit shorter. And insert with a single, half double, and double. And continue this until we have 2 stitches left. So we've made our way down with our row 2. We should all have 2 stitches left. If it looks like we just have 1 stitch left, flip your work over. And you can still see that we have that first stitch from our previous row is just a little bit tucked underneath. But all we're going to do to close off our non-increase row is just 1 half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. Now since we didn't do any increases into this row, we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now it is going to be a repeat of these 2 previous rows for this underarm portion, so just to do it together again, chain 1, flip our work. Into that first stitch, start with 1 half double and 1 double, skip 2 stitches, into the next with a single half double double till we all have 2 stitches left. We've made our way down with our row 3, leaving the last 2 stitches. Since this is an odd number row, we're going to close off our row with our increase again. So skip that second to last stitch, and into the last stitch from our previous row, start with a single, 2 half double, so there's 1, there's 2, and also 1 double crochet. Now our row 3 is complete, and just to get started on the following row again, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, start with a half double and double, and do our sedge stitch till we all have 2 stitches left. We've made our way down with our row 4. We're going to close off our row with a half double crochet. So yarn over, into the last stitch from our previous row, insert with 1 half double. From here, what we're going to do is continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid underarm all the way over to the front of our body, so roughly at mid collarbone, because that's going to be where it's going to connect into the collar. Now we do want to make sure that we're still placing this tail end roughly 1 inch underneath our underarm because we want this to be a slimmer sleeve. And if this falls a little bit lower, then it's going to make for a bigger armhole, therefore a bigger sleeve. So we're just going to continue to keep this closest to 1 inch as possible, and then I will meet you guys back right after an odd number row, so along the top, then we can connect it into the collar together from there. So we are back. We have just completed our underarm portion for our front panel. Now, my total width is just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. I did a total of 9 rows, and the height of my increase end is just about 9 inches or 23 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to connect it into the collar. So what we're going to do is slip stitch it into our front panel stitch marker stitch. Now it doesn't have to be the front panel, it could be the front to the back. They're just about the same, but make sure that we're working into the panel stitch markers and not the shoulders. So into that panel stitch marker, we're going to insert, yarn over, and pull through everything. And now that our underarm portion is connected into the collar, we're going to flip our work and do our following row. So flip your work, and working down our underarm portion, we're going to do our same sedge stitch row. No increases, no decreases. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and work our way back up towards the collar. doing our following sedge stitch row, but leave the last 2 stitches just so I can remind you we aren't going to do any increases or decreases into this portion. So we have made our way down with our first sedge stitch row. At the end of the row, we chained 1, flipped our work, and made our way back up with our following sedge stitch row, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now when we're working into the collar, we won't be doing any increases or decreases. So into the last stitch, insert with just 1 half double crochet. And now we're going to connect it into the base. Now we do want to make sure that we're working towards the other panel stitch marker stitch and not towards the shoulder, but what we're going to do is count up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then from here, we're going to work our way up to the following row. So slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and that's it. We're going to make our way down with our sedge stitch row, then make our way back up with our following sedge stitch row, and connect it into the base the same way that we just did. I will meet you guys back once we're worked into our following panel stitch marker stitch, then we can finish up with our underarm. So we are back. We've made our way all the way across with our sedge stitch rows with no increases and no decreases. Now from here, we're going to do the other underarm portion. So we all should have ended along the top. What we're all going to do now is chain 1 and flip, do our following sedge stitch row per usual. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and do our next sedge stitch row per usual, but leaving the last 5 stitches, then I'll meet you back to do our decrease. So we've just completed our first underarm row and left the last 5 stitches for our second, and now we're going to do our decrease together. Now what we're going to do from here is a decrease of 4 double crochets. So starting with the yarn over, we're all going to skip that following stitch, and into the next, which is the 4th to last, we're going to insert, pull through, next, pull through, next, pull through, and next, which should be the last stitch in our row, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. From here, yarn over, pull through 5, leaving us with 2 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 2. And that's it. Our following row is going to be our normal sedge stitch row, so chain 1, flip, and sedge stitch all the way down. From here, continue to repeat these 2 previous rows for the same amount of underarm rows that we started this piece off with. Once we do a chain up 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have just completed the underarm portion for the front panel. We are now all done with one of our panels. Now we're going to repeat the same thing that we just did here on the other side. So as you guys can see, I already have mine completed, but all we're going to do is repeat the same underarm portion for the same amount of rows. Then we're going to connect it into the other panel's stitch marker stitch, just like how we did this one, but on the other side. Then we're going to repeat everything else until we have the same amount of rows. Once we do a chain up 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So now that both our front and back panel are completed, we're now going to seam it up. So first things first, we're going to flip our work wrong side out, meaning the single crochet row that we did along the bottom of our collar is now flipped on the inside. Then insert your hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel using our same 5.5mm hook. Then we're going to single crochet all the way up. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, then finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Again, first stitch into the front panel, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And we're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way up. Once we've made our way all the way up, do a chain up 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we have just completed seaming everything together. Now what we're going to do from here is our prep for our sleeve. So what we're going to do is now flip our work right side out, meaning the seam that we just did for the sides is now along the inside. Then we're going to insert our same 5.5mm hook into the first side row that we have within our armhole that's nearest to our collar. Then we're going to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So from here, we're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now that chain 1 does not count as a stitch, that's just to secure everything down. Then we're going to find our first side row, which this is mine right here, and we're all going to start with 2 single crochets. So finding that top loop, let's insert with 2. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second. Now we do want to make sure that we're inserting a stitch marker into that first single crochet that we did, just so that we know where the single crochet row started. So I'm just going to take out the stitch marker because we don't need it in that place anymore, and insert it into my first single crochet. Then finding our following side row, which this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Let's do that again. this is my following side row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 singles, so there's 1, and then there's 2. This is my following side row, insert into that top loop with just 1. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way down until we reach our side seam. So we've made our way down with one side of our underarm portion with our single crochet row. Now we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side, but in between we're going to chain 1. And once we have that chain 1, we're going to insert a stitch marker into the top of that chain so that we know where that middle stitch is. Then from here, continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 2 single crochets. Once we're worked into our last side row, do a chain up a 1 and cut, then insert your stitch marker into that last single crochet so that it can match this stitch marker over here. We should have the same amount of stitches on both sides. Then once we have that completed, I will meet you back. So we are back. Our single crochet row is complete. We did insert our stitch marker into that last stitch. And now from here, we're going to get started on the length of our sleeve. So making sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up. We're now going to insert our hook into our middle stitch marker stitch and start by making a chain in multiples of 3, the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. Now you can make this long or short, that's completely up to you. I'd like for mine to be a long sleeve, so I'm going to start by making a chain 66, and that's roughly 18 inches or 46 centimeters. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do our sedge stitch all the way down. So just like our front panel, we're going to block off that last chain, do a chain 1, into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with our first sedge stitch, which is just a half double and double, skip 2 stitches and do our normal sedge stitch all the way down till we all have 2 chains left. Now that we made our way all the way down with our row 1, we should all have 2 chains left. Into that last chain, we're all going to do our same increase that we did for the front panel. So into that last chain, start with 1 single, into that same last chain with 2 half doubles, so there's 1, there's 2, then into that same last chain with 1 double crochet. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So since this is a taller stitch, what we're going to do is count up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2. Into that second stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just a connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, and flip our work. None of those slip stitches count as a stitch. Now for the even number rows, we aren't going to be doing any increases or decreases. So just into that last stitch from our previous row, not into any of those slip stitches into the base, insert with our half double and double, then continue on with our sedge stitch to reach the end of the row, closing off the row with just 1 half double crochet into that last stitch. Then when we're at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, do our following sedge stitch all the way up, leaving the last 2 so that we can increase and connect it into the base together once more. So we just completed our row 2 and also made our way up with our row 3, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're going to do our same increase. So we're going to skip that second to last and into that last stitch with a single, 2 half double, and 1 double. Now that that increase is completed, we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we just did. So counting up the next 2 available stitches, so there's 1, there's 2, into that second stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just a connect. Then from here, to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch, into the base, still doesn't count as a stitch, flip our work, and repeat. From here, continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we're worked into our following stitch marker stitch. Then I'll show you guys how we're going to work into our collar. So we've made our way all the way up, working into our stitch marker stitch with the increase side of our sleeve. Now what we're going to do from here is work into the bottom of the collar, and we're going to be doing our same sedge stitches, but now without any increases or decreases. So basically the same way that we were connecting it into the collar for the front and back panel. So since we all should have ended along the base, what we're going to do is to work our way up to the following row. It's going to be done exactly the same way as it normally would be. So just finding that next available stitch into the bottom of the collar. So we're going to skip all the way over here. If our stitch marker is into place, it should be the stitch right next to that stitch marker. We're going to insert into there with a slip stitch. So insert, pull through everything on our hook. Now since we have worked our way up to the following row, we're going to flip our work, make our way down with our following sedge stitch row, closing off that row with a half double crochet. Then to remind you guys that we aren't doing any increases or decreases, do your following row, so working your way back. When we have those 2 stitches left, put 1 half double crochet into that last stitch, then I'll meet you back. So we've just completed our first sedge stitch row, making our way all the way down, and we have made our way all the way back up, reminding you guys that once we have those 2 stitches left, we're just closing off the row with 1 half double crochet, because doing our rows into the collar, we aren't doing any increases or decreases. And we are going to be connecting it into the base the same way that we've been doing this entire time. So start by counting up the next 2 available stitches. There's 1, there's 2. Into that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch. To work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and repeat. Continue to repeat these 2 non-increase, non-decrease rows until we're worked into our last available stitch that we have into the base of the collar. Then I'll meet you guys back so we can work our way down the other side of our sleeve. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way across with the width of our sleeve working into the bottom of our collar. Now from here we're going to do the decrease side, which is going to be done pretty much the same way as the front and back panel. Now since we all should have ended along the base, worked into the last stitch into the bottom of the collar, we're going to do the following row per usual. So slip stitch into that following stitch that we have, working our way down our underarm, so that stitch marker stitch. Work our way out with our sedge stitches. Then from there we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and work our way back, leaving the last 5 stitches, and we'll decrease together. So we've just completed our first sedge stitch row that worked our way out, and we have worked our way all the way back towards the base, leaving the last 5 stitches. Now we're going to decrease together. So just like our underarm for the front panel, yarn over, skip that following stitch, into that 4th to last, pull through, next, pull through, next, pull through, and next, which should be our last, pull through, yarn over, pull through 5, leaving us with 2 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through 2. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we've been doing this entire time. So count up the next 2 available stitches, insert with a slip stitch, and the following row will have no increases and no decreases. From here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat these 2 rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We have just completed the decrease side of our sleeve, and now from here we're going to seam it up. I went ahead and already seamed mine up, but this seam is going to be the same exact seam that we did for the side, so just a single crochet seam. So what we're going to do is make sure the work is flipped wrong side out, then do our same single crochet seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then we can get started on the cuff. Now, how we're going to do the cuff is first make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning the seam that we just did is now flipped along the inside. Then insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom edge of our sleeve. Then we're going to do a single crochet row. We are going to insert our yarn onto our hook and chain 1, and start with just 1 single crochet into every side row. So finding our first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1. Into my next side row, this is mine right here, insert with 1. Continue with 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around. So the single crochet row along the edge of my sleeve is completed. Now from here we're going to do our slip stitch cuff. So right after we've slip stitched into that chain space, we're all going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 8. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off for the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch. From here, we're going to continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now that we've made our way down with our first slip stitch row, we're going to connect it into the base. So finding that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. That slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. Still doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work, and now we're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that first stitch from our previous row, not worked into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next stitch's back loop, insert, pull through everything, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We are back and we have our first 3 rows completed. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So just like how we did our previous row, just find that next stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, still doesn't count as a stitch, and that's it. From here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Then I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it together, and this seam is going to be done exactly the same way as our collar seam, so an outside loop slip stitch seam. So just to talk y'all through it, we're going to make sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then do our same outside loop slip stitch seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain of 1 and cut. Then we're going to repeat everything we did here on the other side. So now that our sleeves are completed, we're going to get started on our bottom band. So first things first, making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to insert our 5.5mm hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Then start with 1 single crochet into every side row. So just to do the first one, finding that first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. This is my following side row. Find that top loop and insert with 1. That's it. From here, continue with 1 single crochet into every side row. And as a really quick tip, this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this portion can stretch. So if it's a little too tight, we do some stitches with a looser grip. Or if it's too loose, we do some stitches with a tighter grip. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our single crochet row, we're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 12. Then just like for our cuff, we're going to be doing back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases. So go ahead and make your way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we've made our way all the way around with our bottom band, our back loop slip stitch rows, and we are all done. Now this seam is going to be the same seam that we did for the cuff and for the collar, so another outside loop slip stitch seam. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, do our same outside loop slip stitch seam till we don't have any more stitches left. When we don't, do a chain up 1 and cut, then we are all done. Then the last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!